Okay, I think now everyone who would like to join us can join. Our doors are open, so we welcome all of you to our second session of BAFF Talks online with BAFF alumni. And tonight we have a very interesting, very intriguing topic that we will be talking about. That's politics and international relations. And we have our alumni who are real experts in their field. They are representing three different programs of BAFF, that is professional internship, graduate scholar, and research scholar. But before we start our tonight's talk, I would like to give a floor to Catherine Liebert, who is with us tonight, and she is representing BAFF Alumni Council. So, Catherine, would you like to say a few words for the participants?
Yes, sure. Thanks. So very happy to have you all here online, showcasing our great alumni again. This time it's around politics and everything that goes around in terms of the communication in there. I'm very happy that we have a alumni council going on. So I'm one of the council members, and we have a huge alumni community. So tonight you'll meet just a few of them. One of them was in the United States at the same time as me, Susan, and a few new names for me as well. So just a few examples of the great things that our alumni are doing after their program. So just a warm welcome from the alumni side, and I'll give the floor to whoever's next.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. So now we'll go to business, and today we are, as I said, we'll be talking about politics and international relations. So the rules in our BAFF talks are always the same. We are giving the floor to the alumni. You see all their names on the screen, and you see who they are, and they will definitely introduce themselves. So every participant, every speaker will have 20 minutes for their presentation and their thoughts and talks, that they will be just doing their talk. And then after all three of them will have their presentations, we'll have a Q&A session. So throughout their presentation, I would like to ask you to keep your microphones muted so that we assure the best quality of the sound. And you are more than welcome to write your questions in the chat box, and then we will cover all of them after all three presentations. So just not to keep you waiting, I would like to introduce Susan Lillevali from Estonia. So Susan, the floor is yours. You'll do your own introductions about yourself, I believe. So please, welcome, Susan.
Thank you, Ingrida. So, hello. I'm not sure how many of you are there. I can see 84. So I'm Susan Lillevali. I come from Estonia. So I'm kind of intrigued that I was asked to talk here with you today. So as my job actually is not so much about policies, but it's about how to communicate them. But okay, I'll start from the beginning. About my studies, I have studied communications management in Tartu University in Estonia. I did my bachelor's and master's degree at the same university in Tartu. Took me some years, as I actually at the very beginning started with sociology studies, but kind of was lost in that and at my young age, and then shifted to communications. So as I spent most of my study years in one university, so I shift right away to the US part. So it actually, I really had to memorize it today, what year it was, because the years go too fast. But I figured out it was 2014 actually, when I went to US and I was did my professional internship in Washington, D.C. At the company called Greenberg Quinlan Rosner Research. And from this on, I will use the abbreviation, which is GQR, which you usually do in US. You use abbreviations. So that company, I was actually, before going to US, I did quite thorough research on where I want to go and what my interests would be. And that was actually a company which was my first preference. And I was intrigued and interested about what they did. But I have to say it was tough. It took about 3 months, I think, until I got an answer from them that yes, you're welcome and come. I had about 4 or 5 interviews with different people. Some of them there were hardcore interviews, and some of them were a bit more mild. So it wasn't that easy actually at the beginning of me going to US, but it was worth it. So the GQR, I mean, what they do is they're a polling and strategy company for domestic and international either companies or parties or whatever campaign is involved to the project. So in US, they're Democratic pollsters and strategy company, but they have an international branch, which I mainly spent my year, though I had the chance to work with 2014 midterm elections too in US. So yeah, and I thought to kind of describe it, what it was and what's the work ethics and culture in US and how it worked out. So I thought I'd start with my first assignment. And it's, so how it started was that I had to open up Google Maps because my first assignment involved a word in it called Zambia, which I did know that it's in Africa, but that was about it. So I had to kind of find out where it was and then go on from there. But what is the polling and strategy about what they work with? It's so where it starts is really figuring out what the country is, what their main topics or issues are, from very grassroots base and then going onwards on more specific issues. But then, so the first question is, if we're gonna poll there, in order to find out how to campaign there, we need to know what questions we need to ask in our poll. So it's a thorough and very thorough background work, what you do on a country or a company or an organization. And then and step by step, you go on to specific things, the polling process, figuring out the questions, testing the questions, making your kind of adjustments in there after the tests, and then developing a working strategy from the data you got out from the polling process. And I don't know how many of you are involved with communications here, who you're listening here today, but I hope I get to know when we get on to your questions in the end. But then I cannot overstress how important polling or having some kind of data at all in the works of communications is. So, and I did know it before I went to US. and that was the specific thing what I wanted to have my experience on, what I wanted to have my experience there. So that's why I really chose this this company. It was that in the end, after 1 year, and it was very, very kind of full of work this year. I counted that I had to work with about 20 different countries, plus US different districts, and then about 15 to 20 different companies and organizations next to the countries I just mentioned. Talking about the countries, they went from Latin America to Africa, Middle East to Europe, Nordic countries, Baltic countries, Balkan countries. So it was very, very versatile, and really widened my perspective about the politics around the world, how it works, what's going on, what the main issues are, what the communications looks like in different countries, what people are interested of, what their worries are, how you should talk with them, and in order to really have a communications with them. Okay, so I guess you can really, I can be more specific on the things I got to do in the US when we get to the questions, and I hope you have a lot of them, because probably I forgot to mention a lot of things. But next to hardcore working, the nice part, not that the work wasn't a nice part, it was really nice part, but another nice part was traveling around in US, which was exquisite. I mean, I loved it. So what I do now, I mean, came back from US, and actually before going there, I was working mostly in private sector. So I had done some projects, communications projects for government sector, but had never worked in a government agency. Right when I came back, I think it was Thursday, and on Monday I started my new job in Ministry of Social Affairs, advising the minister there on communications issues. That was a totally new field for me. Had to go in depth, and that's where the US experience comes in. I mean, what I had to do there was to fill into a totally new topic, totally new environment very quickly with specific questions. You really do not need to understand what do you want to know, where do you want to get, and in order to understand where you have to swim. So that was a new thing for me. And then from the Ministry of Social Affairs, I moved on to Ministry of Defense and worked mainly on the international communications field. In the beginning, I had the chance to work with the communications of the Estonian presidency, EU presidency period, and then yeah. So, and it was about 2 years ago. Yes, 2.5 years ago, when I started as the head of the strategic communications department at the Ministry of Defense. That shift was pretty harsh too, but on the same time, it wasn't too bad, because I have worked in the same department before and kind of knew what's going on there. But still, that's a whole new experience for me again. the thing is that what's the difference between communications and strategic communications? How do you plan it? And again, talking about strategic communications, again, the experience on polling, what I got from US is so super useful for me today, as with the Stratcom work, we use a lot of polling material, a lot of data coming from polls. We conduct our own surveys in order to understand the environment, the different specifics we want to know. So it's been super useful that I had this chance to work in GQR during my US period. In my next jobs, especially today at in coordinating the strategic communications. So yeah, so when we talk about the policies or political communications or communicating policies, which is mainly, nowadays, it's mainly communicating policies, which is my job or my department's job. I guess the next speakers are way more experienced and way more aware of political kind of aspects, but what I've thought myself, which is what do I take into account when we communicate policies? First is like, why do we communicate them at all? Obviously, because they're related to the people in some ways, either directly or indirectly, but they are. Where do we want to get? What do we want to do? What do we want that our audience would do after they get this information from our side? Do we want a change in action? Do we call for action at all, or is it just an awareness we want to kind of maintain? So these are some of the questions we ask ourselves daily basis when we plan our actions, our communication plans and stuff like that. And we do plan it ahead for about 4 years, because the work plan in Estonian MOD works that way. It's 10 years and 4 years how we plan things. So pretty much today, we do know where we want to be in November 2024, or what the defense capability has to be in 2024. So that's how we plan the communications too in this field. And then, of course, when you work in a policy part, in the minister, for example, then you have your information. It's based on something you wanna, you know where you wanna get, and you just work with this policy. We, on the other hand, we have to communicate this. We work with the plans, how we communicate the policies, and then everyday basis something happens. If not every day, then every week. If not every week, then every month. But something always happens, so you're distracted in your work of explaining your main thing. You really have to work with stuff like accidentally or whatever ways happens around you, and you have to communicate and be clear in your messages with this too, but never forgetting what was your main target, what you really wanted to do, and how this accidental thing or acute thing, what really happened today, how it affects your main target and your main goal where you want to get in 2024 in your messages. So, well, that makes the work of Stratcom interesting, often challenging, but then I wouldn't be in this if it wouldn't be interesting. So I guess I'll wrap myself up here and let Dalia and Martin talk to, and then we get to your questions in the end. So
yeah,
thank you for
Susan.
listening.
Thank you, Susan, for your introductory remarks. And before we go down to Latvia, because we started from the north, so now from Estonia we're moving to Latvia, I still would like to encourage you to put your questions into the chat box, and you may actually address your questions to each speaker or to all of them. It's up to you. But if you address some particular question to some particular speaker, that will be much easier later on when we'll go to that part. And now I would like to give a screen to Martins. And Martins, could you please share your screen if you have any?
Yep, I actually put together a presentation as was asked. I hope it's I'm gonna work.
So
you can see it.
The floor is yours. Yeah, please.
You can see it. You can hear me. Great. I also actually work in Stratcom. I do research for policymakers and I advise them, but I'm going to get to that at the end. I'm going to talk more about why I chose political science, about my career, and how BAFF scholarship plays into all of that, because it played a quite big role in my life. And what I'm going to start with, in 2008, financial crisis hit Baltic states and also the rest of the world. And that's when I started my studies in the Department of Social Sciences in the University of Latvia. And if you remember, if you think that far away, so currently we have COVID crisis, and if you look at media and if you look at people who are commenting online, it kind of feels that this is horrible, this is unique, nothing like this has ever happened before. But bit more than 10 years ago, we had a bit similar situation. We definitely had economic crisis. We had a lot of people anxious, upset, screaming about what government is doing. And essentially, it was pretty chaotic and wild time in Latvia and elsewhere. And during this time, I started my studies. And I was shocked how rational, calm, evidence and science-based the lecturers, professors in this department was. And immediately, political science and other stuff we studied there, it spoke to me. And very early on, I understood that I want to pursue a career in political science, preferably teaching, research, academic career, essentially. And that's kind of the first thing that's quite important. I chose this path, this direction, pretty early on. Because, well, as I see it, so that's actually how life works. You can't figure out everything, but you can choose your direction. And then as you move in this direction, you're going to have opportunities, possibilities, contacts, and more possibilities the longer you go in this one specific path or direction. And another thing that my parents kind of didn't really teach this to me, but it kind of was all around, that it's up to me. It's up to me what happens in my life. If I'm going to work hard, I'm going to increase the possibility that things work out well. If I'm going to be active in my studies, it's going to essentially work out pretty well, most likely. If I'm going to be lazy, well, it's up to you. You can choose it, but it's not going to be very successful for you, most likely. So, and what I did while I was studying, I was also very active socially and, well, essentially kind of in the NGO sector. I made an NGO with a couple of friends. I was active in various, for example, while I was studying, I also made discussions about politics with essentially, well, kind of outside of my classes and lectures with the lecturers and professors from the Department of Social Sciences in NGOs, as also tried to do various activities. So we kind of created this critical thinking and made media literacy promotion, NGO Skeptic Cafe. and I'm going to talk about this at the end. So I was trying not only to study, but also to kind of be active in other spheres. Especially when I apply for scholarships or for a job, it's going to be a better chance for me to get it. I'm going to essentially kind of shine among other candidates. And that's also the second thing that essentially necessity to prove myself to myself, and also to my parents and to the rest of society and world. And that's the reason why I wanted to go to study in US. I didn't want to go on Erasmus because everyone did it. So if you have Erasmus in your CV, it's good. But if you go to US, so I was very ambitious, definitely, when I was trying to get to US. And before BAFF, I applied to the Anegale scholarship that we have here in Latvia for the University of Wisconsin. Eau Claire, this American Latvian doctor, she's deceased, regrettably now. But at the time, essentially since the early 90s, she was giving scholarships for Latvian students to go to the University of Wisconsin and study there. But while I was applying for this, and I was awarded it afterwards, but while I was applying for visa and doing the paperwork and so on and so on, I had this feeling that I think a lot of people who are applying to BAFF and other kind of international scholarships and universities, they have this anxiety. Am I good enough? Is this really complicated, really nuanced? Have I really understood all of it? Because it is not easy. That's essentially quite important. If you are willing to apply to any BAFF scholarship or any university abroad, it is not easy. It is anxious. It is hard. It is essentially almost as a job, because it takes quite a lot of time to get there. And well, in this case, I was lucky. I was accepted in this for 1-year program in this university with the scholarship, essentially for an additional year of studies, bachelor level studies. But this wasn't enough. This wasn't enough. While I was there, I wanted to essentially apply to master's degree in the United States. So I had to take GRE exam with math, with English. I would say quite hard exam to prepare for. And I applied to it. I took it. I did pretty good. And the next thing is applying to universities. So you have GRE exam results. Now you have to apply for universities in the States. And again, it's a whole next process, extremely complicated, also not that cheap. So when I applied to 5 or 6, I was accepted in 2 universities, in Columbia and in New York University. And well, essentially, both are in New York City. So essentially, there's this amazing, unique possibility. I've been accepted to go to essentially the Big Apple after 1 year in Wisconsin, this small town, middle of nowhere, Midwest, to go to the real America, New York City. But getting accepted is one thing. Getting financed is something completely different, because it isn't cheap to study in New York City. Well, and studying US in general. And I was accepted in both universities, but initially in the first year, I didn't get the funding. So I was there, I had been accepted, I had achieved this goal, this dream, but I didn't get the money. And so, of course, emotionally quite hard and difficult period, but I found out this possibility that there is a option to defer the beginning of studies for 1 year. So you've been accepted, so you can talk to the university and kind of negotiate that I'm not going to start this year, I'm going to start the next year. And University of Columbia said, no, you can do this. NYU said, okay, yeah, you have a year, try to get scholarships. Well, basically, best of luck. We'll see you in a year. So I went back to Latvia, got a job here, started studies in the University of Latvia, master's program here. And was applying to scholarships, didn't get Fulbright. I was trying to get some other unrealistic possibilities, but didn't get anything. And BAFF was the last thing that was left on my kind of possibility where could I get the money to study at an NYU from. And well, I was quite happy that I did receive it. But again, that's not the whole story. So I got the BAFF scholarship, which covered half of the tuition cost. The next thing, so at university, there's a possibility to, if you have external scholarship at NYU, you can apply to this tuition kind of reduction program, whatever it's called at NYU. So I have the money from the BAFF to go to attend NYU, but I do not know if I will be able to finish the studies because, well, I don't have essentially enough. So I go to New York University knowing that I have the funding only for 1 semester. I go there, so it works out. NYU also decreases the tuition fee, so I can afford it. So it all works out pretty well in the end. But again, it's all let's say it helps you to develop your character. It's not easy. It's quite hard, very anxious, and then not that easy to achieve. It's totally worth it if you get there. But if I hadn't achieved it, it would be most likely psychologically extremely hard if you've done all these things, but you're almost there, but you can't attend NYU. So I'm extremely thankful to the possibility to well, actually go there and kind of essentially fulfill my dream. And because at NYU, so the one part that was quite important was that so going back to the University of Latvia, so political science there was very good. So theoretical basis, that kind of generic knowledge about the world and political science was very well in University of Latvia. But compared to NYU, in NYU there were people who had actually been places and done things. My thesis advisor, he was a former speechwriter in U.S. Congress. There was a lecturer, professor. He was a former ambassador to China and a couple of other countries. There was a guy from CIA giving us lectures. Imagine a guy from CIA, and that felt really cool. There's a former campaign manager for Jimmy Carter, and a couple of other really important and impressive people who not only had this theoretical knowledge but also practical experience. And also there were a couple of theoreticians and people who actually developed theories, lecture theory, essentially these rules for rulers, one kind of very big political science kind of idea how democracies and authoritarian regimes are different, and a couple of other people who were quite interesting. That's one thing. The second thing is that the studies, it wasn't like in Latvia, it was like essentially like in movies, where students actually meet together and discuss, okay, what we have learned, like how can we, what is this, like let's figure out how this works. We had a class on game theory, which was extremely complicated with a lot of math, a lot of essentially kind of real science, not this, because political science is mostly the soft science. You know, let's read something, discuss something. So we also had some very quant-based political science classes at NYU, which was great because we definitely lacked that in Latvia as well. And so yeah, studies, practical experience, that was one kind of block of my experience while I was at NYU. The next thing was that I also had a internship. So to graduate from NYU, it's not enough if you have a theoretical knowledge, you attend lectures, you also need to have an internship. And here, well, on one hand, I got lucky. On the other hand, I had achieved something, and then they did accept me. But in 2003, when I started this studies at NYU, the financial crisis was essentially, well, almost over-ish. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Latvia was essentially underpaid, understaffed, and Latvian mission, United Nations, was also understaffed. So in United Nations, regular meetings every day, only 4 people in Latvian representation to United Nations. So I went there, said, hey, I'm here, I study here, I need an internship. Well, do you want me to help you for free? And that's how I got to attend various meetings, take notes, reports that I wrote on. I was working on these post 2015 Millennium Development Goals. And also I got, so 2014, that was the year when Russian war with Ukraine started. I got to sit in the meetings at Security Council when Russia was essentially lying about everything. Ukraine was saying, no, these are Russian troops here. Quite interesting and unique experience to see this, not only read about it, but see some of it in person in the Security Council room at the United Nations. Also attended various conferences while I was in the US. So I went to West Point. There was a conference there. Essentially tried to get as much out from this possibility this time as I could. And also, there's possibility from NYU for political science students to go to Washington, D.C., again, essentially go inside this State Department, the Congress, talk to a couple of Congress, well, not congressmen, but kind of people working for them. So essentially kind of see how the government works from inside, not just learn from it, but see how it works. And extremely valuable and useful possibility and kind of insights, both from theoretical and also practical level at the while studying at NYU, thanks to a BAFF scholarship. And when I came back, so I've been doing two main things. So one thing is an academic work. I'm going to talk to that in a minute. Another thing is NGOs. So long before, so 2014, before disinformation became a buzzword, fake news, information warfare, before that was buzzword, me and a couple of people in Latvia, we established Skeptic Cafe, this kind of informal NGO, which was talking about media literacy, critical thinking, things like that. So way even before 2014, and then even before Trump, we thought that people should base their lives, their ideas, their political, economic, whatever beliefs in data, facts, science. So we've been doing that. So that's one thing that I've been doing well, for last almost decade now. And after I came back, next thing, so one thing that I already mentioned. So this direction. So my advice to people who study, the students now, and who are kind of trying to find what they want to do in their life, is to find this direction, moving it without any kind of specific, by 25 I'm going to achieve this, by 30 I'm going to achieve this. Just the direction that you're moving into, and the possibilities and opportunities are going to show up sooner or later. The next thing is a strategy. So my mentor, when I was studying at the University of Latvia, Los Mojnieks, so he gave a very good advice. So if you want to pursue academic career, you need to think how you can sell yourself to a domestic audience, well, Latvia, Baltics. Now you can sell yourself to a foreign audience. And for domestic audience, it's quite easy. So I had studied at NYU, so I had followed, well, not only followed, but also learned about US domestic and foreign policy far more in depth than essentially most people in Latvia. So I could essentially comment on politics of the United States, US foreign policy. And in 2016, well, there was the election campaign going on in US. Well, I started writing articles for media about what's happening there. And well, sooner or later, I was invited also to talk in media, to comment what's happening. And that's how I got kind of in this kind of role of political commentator, mostly about United foreign policy, domestic issues, regrettably a lot about Trump and the crazy stuff, not about kind of content and substance in the last couple of years. But still, that's kind of the idea that strategically I decided, well, this is something I can sell for domestic audience, US foreign policy, domestic issues. Okay, I'm gonna work on it and try to show people that I know a bit more than other commentators, people in Latvia. The next thing. So when I came back, I applied for a job in research and also teaching a couple of universities. And the research, I also used to work for Ministry of Defense, also essentially kind of surveys, focus groups, interviews with essentially after 2014 with Russian speakers, why they believe what they believe. So essentially Russian disinformation in Latvia, and how to counter it, how to essentially try to reduce the influence of Russia in Latvia. And this is a TED talk on the topic that I gave, a picture from TED talk on this topic that I gave a couple of years ago. And this has also been quite good to my career, because this is something in Latvia. So in Latvia, the official position of the government is that everything's fine. We're integrating Russian speakers. This is kind of, no one wants to deal with this. But foreigners, Canadians who sent troops to Latvia, Americans, British, and other embassies, experts, military representatives here are extremely interested in this topic. So that's kind of how I can sell my knowledge, my insights to the rest of the world. For domestic audiences, not so much, because no one wants to deal with kind of Russian speakers here. It's this kind of essentially the official position is that everything's fine. We're integrating them. They're kind of not in a Russian media sphere of influence. It's not a problem. The real picture is not as happy and not as rosy as the government paints. Currently, so I was working in the Ministry of Defense for almost 5 years, and my goal was so I'm essentially sharing the results of research, my expertise, insights from focus groups, interviews, data that we have to various foreign think tanks, research centers, experts, and well, the hope was to kind of show myself. And sooner or later to get hired by one of them. So, and this is what has happened. Now I work for a US-based research center. Again, working on the same thing, disinformation, Russian influence in Latvia, but essentially for not for the Ministry of Defense or Latvian government, but for the kind of clients in Western Europe and United States. So just to sum this all up, what's important is that so I had this realization that I want to pursue academic career, that I actually want to go study in the United States. That US is kind of my academic interest very early on, and then I was working consciously on this, trying to actually do things that are going to put me ahead of other candidates, put me ahead of other essentially competitors for BAFF scholarship and for other kind of possibilities that are out there. That's one thing. The second thing, so yes, this kind of strategic approach to career, to essentially with life as well. You're trying to think how to position yourself better for domestic market and foreign market if you're a researcher. So again, I try to take, as you could hear, these topics that are interesting, that are relevant, that are essentially that I'm able to sell. At the same time, it's not that easy. It's quite hard and quite complicated. So U.S. foreign policy, everyone has opinion on it. The fact that I've studied it for quite a long time doesn't really matter for a lot of people, because they know, they've read something online. The same with Russian influence in Latvia and disinformation. There are a lot of people who think they know what's happening in Latvia, but it's not based in data, and that's based on what real situation on the ground is. So again, so if you try to take these kind of big, complicated, and also sensitive topics, it's not easy always. It's quite challenging. But if you have some questions on this, I'm going to finish with this, and then we can talk about this at the end. Thanks.
Thank you, Martin. It was very interesting, and I guess it was very intriguing for the upcoming discussion later on. And now we'll have the last but definitely not least speaker from Lithuania, Dalia Bankauskaitė. She's representing a different program. It's a research scholar program. So now, Dalia, the screen is yours. Would you like to share your screen?
Okay. Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's really a great pleasure to be part of this company. And it happened, actually, the thing that I feared most happened. Brilliant Susanna and Martin said everything most interesting and most the smartest things possible, that actually I have very little to say, to add to. I structured since I have to, there's no much fascinating about my slides, but at least it keeps the compass where I want to, how I want to proceed with my presentation. So usually you start from the job title, who I am. And my job title is that I work as a lecturer at Vilnius University, teach public diplomacy and persuasion communication for master course. And my course of students, this is an international course, usually consists of students up to 12 18 students from 12 foreign countries. So actually I'm really directly exposed to the international foundations, donors, programs that facilitate, help them to participate, to attend such courses, university courses, and achieve their degrees. I also work as a non-resident I'm a non-resident fellow with the Center for European Policy Analysis. We are colleagues with Martins, and cooperate in various projects, research projects included. And at the same time, I cooperate with the Swedish Defense University as a research fellow on the Baltic Sea region security areas. And of course, as a researcher, work on smaller or bigger scale projects. One of recent ones are Start to Think. This is, we create the space for critical thinking. Google, it's a media literacy project, might find something useful. So what? What does it mean in practice? My associations with different analytical centers and different projects. Actually, that is translated into my lifelong experience. More than over 20-25 years activities in the field of information, with a special focus on strategic communication. Also currently moving softly to the field of total defense, with a special focus on the whole of society approach. That is really, in a normal language, it is motivation and mobilization people and society. By working for so long in this field of communications, I took two lessons. One is that there's no communication without a content, without information. There might be communication about nothing, but it is a very destructive approach. Another thing that I wanted to say, but I'll come back. I think I will refer to it a little bit later. And that is connected with my research. How comes that I became a BAFF alumnium, Baltic-American Freedom Foundation? First of all, I have to answer to the question how have I ended in the information field, and it happened is a very simple way. As I finished after finishing my master's studies at the London School of Economics, I came home to Vilnius, and then Lithuania applied for the EU membership. And I was prepared to work in the European integration policy and politics. But at that time, the department was managed by colleagues, masculine men, that actually thought that information and communication is not their business, or it's not interesting and it's not important. So actually, I ended with this file on my desk, and was responsible of organizing, mobilizing Lithuanian society for gaining support for the Lithuanian membership in the EU. And that was the first lesson for me, learn that that's what I referring to in my previous slide, that actually society is the most people, us, and society as such is the strongest factor in state building, in anything, in politics and policy making. If society, if we people do not want, not a single policy or politics will be implemented. That's why it's so important, people, us. and our knowledge, our perception, and our attitude attitude and understanding of the environment that exists around us. After the mission of Lithuania, after Lithuanian accession to becoming the member of the EU, my mission was over, and I was engaged in a smaller or bigger scale projects, like international project of Lithuania's nation branding, excellent experience, very intense, very demanding experience. Later on, Vilnius European Capital of Culture, extremely challenging. First exposure to the black, not even dark, but black PR that came from at that time from the eastern flank. Also working on the strategy for Lithuania's presidency at the EU Council, and so many other smaller or bigger projects, research as well as practical. And then 2014. The annexation of Crimea, attack on Ukraine, and my colleague Edward Lucas recruited me for SIPA project. For SIPA actually, and I even consulted Ingrida on that project, I remember, on Stratcom issues, debunking and fact-checking, that is actually countering disinformation. They were the first steps that SIPA, Center for European Policy Analysis, launched. Working for a while and doing fact-checking the way you understand and do by your own understanding, and having the contextual knowledge plus intuition as a professional, as a researcher, and as a human being. I got into the subject of, as I said, motivation and mobilization of the society as a decisive factor for state crafting. And there was, following BAFF, I applied for the research scholarship, and scholarship presented my case, and was lucky enough to become a research fellow at SIPA, Washington DC based. At that time, SIPA was I would call a niche think tank, analytical think tank, focusing on a very boutique issue, defendability of the Baltic states. Imagine what 3 Baltic states, this area recently became members of the NATO, and how NATO in principle can defend this the area that has a bottleneck between Kaliningrad and Belarus, 65 kilometers corridor that could be easily closed in a conventional conflict. And then having the disinformation operations coming from Russia, how that area, how the Baltic states could be defended, both under being conventional attacked or exposed to huge information warfare or information operations. So that was an excellent year as a BAFF research fellow at SIPA, exposed professionally, growing, expanding my knowledge, expanding the knowledge of the USA political culture as well as culture as such. As a footnote, I could say that it happened so that I got seriously ill unexpectedly. So I was also exposed to the health sector and health sector management, which was again another quite an experience that I could happily share. Finally, so what's next? What I'm doing now? I'm working on projects engaged, focusing on building society's resilience, and that is done by interoperability. First of all, enhancing interoperability of state institutions, their ability to cooperate and to mobilize to their most in a critical situation, in a crisis situation. Pandemic situation is very relevant. Also, it's so important to see how society or civic society, that is active citizens, are engaged in state management, and see how this gap between state institutions operations and the civic society operation could be closed or could be narrowed as much as possible. How state institutions, these are again the same people, the same parts of the society, could really believe and trust the civic society, and think how they could be engaged and rely and trusted while implementing, while designing, and later implementing policies of the country. In the field of information, there are so many topics, there are many angles that information could be and communication could be approached. In a nutshell, I would say that information, communication, strategic communication, resilience, societal resilience, these are concepts, and rather vague concepts unless they are translated into very concrete measures and activities. So today's challenge from the strategic communication point and information point is that the huge demand for quality information. There's ocean of all kind of information, textual, visual, sound, behavioral, but what is observed now here, that people really looking for reflexive and conceptual information. Again, information, it does not born out of nothing. We human beings create it. So far, we not always artificial intellect, but that's why it's so important. Critical thinking and demand for critical thinking is groomed from the kindergarten. It's so important to have this ability grafted among citizens, as well as moral values, whatever it might mean. But the moral compass is very matter, because then we can answer to the third challenge: media, conventional and social media, as well as business media models. We talk so much about algorithms and that they actually manage and tailor information, and we become less. We are locked in our echo chambers and not aware of the business models or business models. So I think that if the same creators, owners, as well as creators of algorithms and owners of social media would be really are critically thinking and have moral compass, I think then the danger posed by today's social media that is so topical would be much less. That's actually so much that I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Dalia. So now we are going to the very intriguing part of our BAFF Talk session, that is questions, and we have quite a lot of them in our chat box. So I would like to encourage you to put your faces on screens, if you would like to put your cameras on, so that it's easier for our speakers to to talk to you and when they see your faces. So, shall we start from the very beginning? And we'll start from the first question that we got. It was yet for Susan. So the question from Ivor to Susan is, polling, constructing questions, test survey sounds like return to sociology. Is it true? Is it return to sociology?
Well, it is true. I mean, but it's the thing is why. I mean, there is truth on that. When you're working on communications, you really need to know how sociology works, what kind of data you need, and how to gather it, because you're gonna need it in your job. And if you know how the system works and the whole sociology world and what is the logic behind it, and because you do want to get as acute and accurate data as you can, so you really do need it. Though, I mean, I'm not polling myself today anymore that much, but I need to talk to pollsters and need to advise them from our side what do we need and what this survey should be about and what we're really looking from it. So if you're working with the communications, be prepared that you need to have some knowledge about polling and surveys too.
Thank you. And there is another question for you, Susan, as well. Please tell, what did you learn about political communication in the US? What is the message that you can share?
It depends if it's about US politics or politics somewhere else. I mean, we've all seen, we've been living inside the US politics at this very period for several months right now, even if we were not there. It's very different. The system is very different. It's very complicated how it works. And but what I learned was that, and also from different countries we worked with, is that there is one thing what every politician wants to get. I mean, if there are elections, they want to win them, or they want to form a government with somebody else. And they use pretty much the same means, I mean, by during their campaigns or with their strategies, but sometimes with different, how should I put it? With yeah, the means might be the same, but the aims might be different. Might be politically the most correct answer I could get out right now, but yeah. So because if you start to differ them or put them online and try to kind of see the differences between them, then as a communications professional, they use maybe same techniques, but with different angles. So, but the thing is, you really need to see more than one campaign, more than one election period to get to this essence. As we've talked with our colleagues here in Estonia, we all might study in the same school, but what actually makes us professional in the end is how many cases we've been through. So we learn the same things, but how we conduct our jobs or our campaigns or whatever, we do it differently. We all sue our own suits. So, and it depends on the amount of the cases you've been through yourself.
Yeah, and actually that would be very true as well for Dalia, because Dalia was in the US during one of the campaigns. So Dalia, would you like to join and to say your insights here, because you were also observing quite a scene of political communication during the first Trump campaign. Could you unmute yourself? We don't hear you.
Yeah. Fully agree with Susan. Experience, and then ability to question and to observe. That's true. You observe how it goes, and as a communicator, the first. As well as even now, I admire Trump's ability to be very plain, very clear in formulating the way tweets are formulated. It's so difficult to really to argue. It goes. So I think that was one of the major successes as a person's communication, let alone other means, other structure, because there's no only one person. You have to take this holistic approach, and there are so many other players, stakeholders engaged in the campaign. I'm taking only communication field. So that was done very, very, very professionally, plus engaging the background that we all know. Yeah.
But it's true what Dalia said, is like the ability to question also your actions. I've seen during the midterms in 2014, when we were conducting some of the campaigns for senators or congressmen, I mean, you could do the whole campaign already. You could have it there already. You have even the ads already there, and then you start to test them, and they all go to junk because they don't work. So, and you start again because your messaging either in words or in visual way were not working.
And I wonder now when a lot of Trump supporters move to parler instead of tweet because of self-exit they organized. So really thinking further, you know, how long you are locked into this echo chamber, not to mention other things, regulations, morale, etc., whether, you know, that should not be regulated, but communication wise, who is going to manage what is going to manage that huge amount of audience and locked in their own bubble. And there are more than one option to it, but it's a huge opportunity, a tool, as well as a huge risk or threat, actually.
Yeah, thank you. That was interesting discussion between you two girls. And also, there is one comment that I really like to make it vocal. We have a participant from Georgia. Welcome. We don't see you anymore, Maria. Yeah, it's great, very great thing. So another question for Susan. Any tips for university students who would like to have a similar career path to yours, internships, NGOs, or other relevant organizations to get involved with?
Well, my first recommendation would be BAFF, but then really, as I said, it all, in order to, at one point, to be a strategist, you really need to be a practitioner at first. Then before that, you need to be a student, a fellowship program participant somewhere. You really, it's a demanding field. And you really need to go through a lot to kind of have this perspective and overview and the ability to pull things together. And you also really need to extract a lot of information through your head. But what I would suggest, I mean, if you are a student right now and you haven't started your career yet or your job path, then just do as much as you can. Participate where you can. Right now, it's a bit difficult to travel around, but if it's possible to enlist to a fellowship program or job somewhere in your own country, do that. And just try out everything and do everything. When I started at the GQR in US, in the beginning, I really did everything there. I was, I literally also was picking up the phone at the front desk while the office manager was at lunch. But that, what it gave, like, question all the time, what does it give to me? And what that specific episode gave me was that I got to know the organization. I got to know who worked there, what their specifics were, who is calling them, in what issues, stuff like that. You get to know where you are right now and what is this place about. So I do know that when you're in your like fellowship or you're doing like practice somewhere, then you might get some assignments which are not that interesting, but just do them. Don't whine, because they will give you something which you're gonna need.
Yeah, and a very similar question to Martin's from Laura. She would like to ask, where would you recommend to do an internship and how to find a good place? The girl is studying in Germany. So if you have any tips.
It's hard to give specific tips because it's up to what you're interested in. So if you're interested in research, look at think tanks, research centers. Well, essentially, so very often, and I had this as well. If you're a student, if you're not sure of yourself, you feel like, well, who even are you? Why would you write them? They don't care. They're not gonna like reply or so on. And this might happen on sometimes. Yeah, you might not get a reply, but just try reaching out. Sooner or later, someone might reply, might offer you some possibility. So research centers, if you're interested in academia, if you're interested in NGOs, then it's that. In Germany, in Bundestag, there is a possibility, an internship possibility for Latvians from Latvia. I don't know details, but there is. I know some people who've gone to Bundestag and worked there. So if you're interested in government institutions, then go there. So it's a broad field, but the main thing is to try. You might not get reply once, twice, but someone sooner or later is going to reply. So it's important not to get discouraged by a couple of rejections or no replies, because it's not about you. You know, you apply to an NGO. Maybe at this moment they simply don't need anyone. They don't have funding. They're busy with something you don't know. So it's not really about you. If you get, as I said in my presentation, lucky. So if the Latvian mission to United Nations was fully staffed, they most likely wouldn't even consider my application. So, but they had only 4 people. I got lucky essentially to go there. Okay, of course, I had come to New York. I had previous experience in political science and so on. Yes, but still, luck plays a big role in all of this. Kind of forging your path in career ahead.
Thank you. And here is another question from a student of master's degree in international relations, and he is currently studying data science. And also likes international relations and political relations very much. So he would like to combine both interests in his career. Since Susan worked with pollings, perhaps she or someone else could advise any potential career path for someone like the person who is asking. So anyone? Susan,
what I can say that is polling today has a lot to do with data science, and also kind of how to build the whole poll up. So by all means, you probably will have to learn a few things in order, like extra during your job or at school, but you can do it. So definitely.
And I think another feature of today is this interdisciplinary approach. You start with one thing and actually you not necessarily end, but you see that you have to know a little bit more on that or this. this is the time when you know a lot about very little, and at the same time you are expected to have, or there's a huge value of those who have this comprehensive approach or holistic approach. So even when we talk about communication, we have to talk about psychology, sociology, communication, big data, or just technologically how it functions, not to mention history, political science, geopolitics, and so many other things, depending on what kind of communication, what sector of communication we're talking.
And just to
Thank
add
you.
to this, if I can
Yeah,
add, so a big upside is that in political science, a lot of people are not very familiar with math and essentially statistics. And if you're into data science, that's a big upside for you, because there's a lot of stuff going on, not only in polling and surveys, but also well, let's say, you know, actually how algorithms collect information about us. So basically you can get a lot of data from people if you know how to work with this data. And there are definitely applications for that in politics and international relations as well. So definitely that's a very prospective field to enter if you are good with math and statistics.
Yeah, and I would like to ask Martin to keep your microphone on, because the next question is also for you. The question is, since you said that your studies in the US, it's like a movie, it became the reality, and international relations have become very intense globally for at least 5-6 years, almost like in movies. How do you select focus topics, countries or regions? What is your particular interest and why?
Well, in Latvia, so or Baltics, so essentially you have to look around and understand a couple of realities. So if you focus on something, some very obscure specific topic, I don't know, let's say sub-Saharan Africa drug trafficking, most likely you're not gonna get much traction or attention. It's an important question, definitely, but this is a problem with a lot of students in political science and international relations. They focus on something that may be interesting for them, maybe interesting for the world, but in Latvia, well, it's regrettably, you're not going to be able to essentially use that most likely ever, unless you get extremely lucky, you get some international organization or so that's quite important to see what is well, the big topics. And in Latvia, Baltics, so Russia definitely one, NATO, European Union, big kind of three pillars, essentially what's always going to be relevant. US definitely over last since 2014, definitely more important as a strategic partner. What hasn't yet become important in Latvia is China. Well, it has, but like in academic circles, so not enough attention is paid to China, because that's the biggest topic in US and Western Europe. Chinese influence in well, essentially most of the world. Also in Baltics, there is big Chinese presence and influence, but that's not, it hasn't been politicized yet as in Western Europe and the United States. So that's also something interesting in. But just going back, well, if you look at the world and how it's changing, one thing that definitely is going to be there, so disinformation. So that's something, if you're interested in kind of these domestic issues, why people believe crazy stuff, that's not going to go away. It's going to become only bigger and bigger. That's quite a big topic to focus on. So for me, as I said, so U.S. foreign policy, that's one thing, and also domestic issues whom I follow, that's one thing. So then Russia, Russian influence in Latvia, disinformation, and now disinformation also applies to the United States, because a lot of disinformation is coming from U.S. president, so that's kind of combined. But overall, so in Latvia, so now and then, so kind of these Eastern Partnership issues, so what happens in the Ukraine, Georgia, Central Asia, some of these issues are relevant now and then. Middle East, it's kind of topic that pops up when there's a conflict or crisis there, but there's not much that's going on regarding Middle East in Latvia. But again, it's something that's always going to be relevant. And there is a, but again, so Middle East, so kind of Eastern Partnership countries, you can find the people who are working on that in Latvia and probably in Baltics as well.
Yeah, there is a follow-up question to Martin. How do you define data? What data do you collect and or interest of?
Essentially, this day and age, data is everything you do online, but also in real life. So everything is essentially can be measured. Well, almost everything can be measured. But I work with surveys. So in surveys, we essentially ask questions to people in a country, so then we make it representative. We have people from each region, from each age group, both genders, linguistic groups, whatever you have in the country. So to make it representative. Then we can take this snapshot of what people believe. Well, if there are changes over time, so if Russian speakers agree more to Russian propaganda, that's a problem. Something's not going well. So either they're consuming more criminal media or the government communication not reaching them, something's happening. So that's one thing you can do. Well, one thing I do. Another thing is interviews with people. So you have a survey, it's percentage. Then you go and make interviews, you have focus groups, you get 8 to 10 people in a group and make them discuss something, and you try to understand deeper, so why they believe what they believe regarding whatever question are you working on. And that's kind of the data that, and again, this is sociology, yes, but political science uses quite a lot of sociological research methods, and that's also a lot of psychology, and that's totally normal. This day and age, all these fields are intertwined. And so yeah, data, but that's again not all of it. As I said, everything is well measurable. Everything's data. Although a lot of tools, basically. So if you're tweeting, I have access to essentially most of the tweets coming from Baltic states. So essentially, I can essentially search what are the trends on Twitter, what topics are becoming bigger, more important now, why. For example, in Latvia, so nationalism is very big in November because we have this national, essentially Independence Day, we have this Veterans Day. So nationalism is a topic that's just trending currently in Latvia. And then so essentially you can these online tools you can measure quite a lot. So this is so nationalism is just one example. So I know when there are NATO exercises happening in Latvia, so NATO is trending, not always in a good kind of terms is discussed online. So you can see what are the big issues. Again, it's all data that you can access if you have access to specific software. And yeah, but there's a lot of, well, it's not only that, there's a lot of data on conflicts and various and terrorism and various issues. And this is quite important. The political science and IR, very often it's thought and also presented just as these kind of discussions and very theoretical kind of thought constructs, but also there can be math and then data involved in analyzing what's happening in a country or in the world.
Martin, and now you have a very concrete question, and you'll have to give a very concrete tip for a student who would like your recommendation how to present one's NGO or CSO career in order to appeal to universities' admission staff and to potential internship providers. So how to impress them?
Yep. So usually you have to write a motivation letter, or there might be even an interview. And the idea is that essentially that's, so in the motivation letter, you just don't write, I'm very hardworking, I'm very motivated, I'm very interested in this and this. You say it with examples. So I am actually working in an NGO which is active in animal rights or kind of political issue or whatever you're working on. So you give an example, and that's much more stronger than simply writing, well, I am kind of active and interested. No, you show that I've been working on this issue for volunteering on this issue for a year or how many times. And then this internship I've done A, B, and C. So this shows that actually I know A, B, and C. It's a very effective way how you can essentially show, not only tell, but also show that you've done something. And again, it doesn't have to be anything kind of grandiose or amazing. And that was my big surprise when I went to NYU. I was expecting that the students are going to be, like really smart and achieve a lot of things. And I'm like, who am I from this tiny country? Totally not the case. The students in other countries that are the same as we are, they're normal, regular people. Some done more, some are doing less. It's essentially everything you do is well, could be significant in your career because you don't know what's going to come next.
Thank you. Hopefully it will be very useful for Ivor. So now, question to Dalia. With disinformation and misinformation upsurge online during the pandemic, how could we notice the false facts ourselves, and could we even debunk it?
Simplest or shortest answer: misinformation is usually mistakes done by media just because of ignorance, and usually they are corrected, so just you have to follow. Disinformation is an intentional supply of wrong, false information for purpose to mislead you, to subvert, to cheat you. So what you have to do is to check the source, first of all, to see the source, how reliable it is, as well as to look for additional information from other sources that you trust and rely. It's like, you know, the water. You don't drink the water just from any place. Usually check whether it is a clean water. So that's the same with the information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there is another question, Dalia, for you. Please explain the society resilience. Should we be traced?
Resilience, the term, thank you very much for this question. As I said, it's a generic concept, but usually by resilience it is understood ability of the society or a human being to bounce back after experiencing certain critical situations, some crisis. Might be some, if we talk in military terms, it might be some attack, it might be a disaster, storm, earthquake, it might be a disease. How resilient you are, how quickly you can recover from the crash, from the attack.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. There is another question from Martin. Are there some websites, think tanks that look into nationalism in Latvia? Very, very specific question.
Well, the question is what aspects. So there are a couple of experts, Martin Kaprāns, Daunis Auers, who are quite good at this. So Daunis Auers looks at radicalization, Martin Kaprāns at Russian speakers in Latvia, and there is a Center for East. I'm trying to remember the name in English. Center for East European Policy Studies. I think that's how it's in English. With Kudors and Māris Apurītis, who are doing good stuff on kind of Russia and Russian speakers. There's Institute of Foreign Affairs, but they're doing all sorts of stuff. So definitely there are some sources, but again, it's nationalism is very broad. So Russian nationalism, Latvian nationalism, radicalism, what in particular. But definitely there are people who are working on this in Latvia. Yeah.
Thank you. And here we have a question to all three of you. The last question before we finish our session. It's from a PhD student who is American now. She works in Tartu, Estonia. And the question is, what you did or what experience you had in the US promoting your countries? What did you promote or realize you could promote? Also, did you have any aha moments during your experience in the US where you realized something unique about Estonia, Latvia, or Lithuania that you might not have noticed otherwise? And how has this helped you in your career choices? A very nice, very explicit question. Who would like to start with this question, to answer this question? Or just your thoughts, remarks?
Like I can start with this. So one thing that was quite a big kind of aha moment for me, and again, it's very kind of closely related to target audience analysis and then the strategic communication. You need to understand the target audience if you want to communicate with your audience. And in the US, what surprised me a lot was American Latvian community there. It is very conservative, concentrated around the churches, and definitely very different than Latvians who live in Latvia. So they have essentially conserved their view of what Latvia is, what it is like. it is totally different than what Latvia is actually like. And that was quite a big surprise. For example, the 18th of November, the Independence Day in US, where I was celebrating it, was celebrated as kind of this somber and then a serious moment. Well, Latvia, it's a party with fireworks, it's happy and people are having fun. And that's quite important. Unless you understand how this target audience sees Latvia and what kind of role in the world, you will get it totally wrong, because it sees Latvia, world, US quite differently than people who live in Latvia. And what I did to promote Latvia in US, so when I was studying, it was 2014. So Russian aggression in Ukraine, and suddenly all the professors asked me questions. So what's happening? You know, like, you have a lot of Russians in Latvia. Is this something that happened in Latvia as well? And I could explain that no, it's not that simple. I could give more insights, because by 2014, the emphasis in studies. So basically, there was not one, very few. Kind of courses that touch upon Russia, much more stuff on China and Middle East. Russia was not an issue in US, well, at least in my kind of perspective, in 2014. So I could give some insights about the region to my kind of, to the students in my courses and a couple of lectures as well.
Thank you, Martin. Ladies, Susan?
Yeah, so I can follow up from here, because Martin's brought up this invasion of Ukraine, and I was there at the same time, so I had kind of a similar questions or a sentiment, or maybe also a worry from my colleagues that what's going to happen to you now, or your country. So that was and actually I don't know how I would have taken this when I would have been back here, but then their worry made me worry too there. So that was kind of had like a loop of this, but then I was kind of lucky, I mean, about promoting the country, because I got to be there in US when our Estonian Georgian movie made to an Oscars shortlist. It was a movie called Tangerines. So it was among 5 films in the category of foreign language movies. So that kind of gave me a chance to promote and to talk with my colleagues about this. And I had actually the movie was out in Estonia already for a long time. So I asked my mom to buy basically all the DVDs they had in Estonia and sent them to US, because everybody was very interested, and there were a lot of articles about this movie and stuff, so that was kind of great. But I found, actually what I found there is that it wasn't so much about me promoting Estonia, but it was about Americans themselves being very interested about where you come from, and that was kind of nice. I mean, there were a lot of questions. Apparently, well, I was in DC, but apparently a lot of Americans did know Estonia because of our previous president, who basically for them, for Americans, was pretty much also American. But I'm not sure how good the knowledge is around the US, but it was pretty good in DC and New York and close to these areas. And then in the end, I managed to turn my colleagues to a religion of black bread, because I made my own black bread there. And if anybody's made the bread themselves, they know that you need a seed from the previous bread you made. So I left mine there, and I know that about 4 of my colleagues still make black bread out of the seed they got from me.
This is really great, really heritage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dalia, what about you?
Okay, I was privileged because I was stationed in Washington DC and working with extremely intellectual, educated people. What I observed, USA society extremely friendly, open, and very inquisitive. not necessarily knowing very much about our part of the world. At the research level or think tank level, for me was aha moment to see what is an industry is the think tank community and analytical centers. This is really an industry, and as everywhere, there are a lot of bullshit, but there is a lot of extremely good quality information. For a small country like Lithuania, like Latvia, like Estonia, first, it's a huge labor to work, to be seen, to be noticed, to be put on the agenda on a political map, to get the focus, and extremely risky, and most risky for the embassies to be locked in their echo chambers of only communities, which is extremely important. And communities, our national communities are diverse depending on the immigration level waves. But really to be very daring, very intense, and very creative in getting information and focus. And especially, we have to be able to talk about, demonstrate knowledge, expertise of other issues, not only about Lithuania or Latvia or Estonia. We have to show that we represent much more and have stronger know-how. So these are the aha moments. In a nutshell. Sorry,
Okay.
I have to take another call now on a...
Thank you so much. We are wrapping up our session. Thank you very much, Dalia, Susan, Martin. You were really great. Thank you everyone who joined us tonight. And I think you all deserve the round of applause, the virtual round of applause, unfortunately only. So for the next for the information, what will be happening next? Tomorrow morning, we'll be sending to you the very short survey form, and we are kindly asking you to fill it out because we need your opinion, we need your feedback, and we would like just to have your thoughts to help us improve. And if you would please follow us on our social media, and if you like our pages or just follow us, that would be really very nice. Next BAFF Talks session will be happening next month, and we are more than happy to invite you and to see you if you are interested. That will be on December 9th, same place, same time, from 6 to, well, a little bit maybe more than 7:30 p.m. And then we will be talking about mesmerizing world of arts and design. So you're more than welcome to join us, follow us on social media. There will be a post, register, and please join us. And for tonight, thank you very much.